Hi, everyone. This is Jan Kabili with another episode of TheFIX, the TWiP podcast that's all about Lightroom, Photoshop, and post-processing. If you're a Lightroom user, or if you're thinking about becoming one, you probably know by now that this week, Adobe released new versions of Lightroom CC and Lightroom 6. You may have seen some tutorials online, including here on last week's episode of TheFIX, about some of the hot new features in Lightroom CC and Lightroom 6. But you can't get to those features unless you know how to install Lightroom 6 and CC and how to upgrade your catalog. So that's what we're going to tackle in this episode of TheFIX. And my special guest to help explain all of that is Lightroom author and expert and photographer, the great David Marx. Let's sit down and talk to David Marx about installing and upgrading to Lightroom CC. Hi, David Marx. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Well, I was so excited that you accepted my invitation on short notice. As everybody knows, Lightroom came out last week, or was it this week actually, with a new version of the program. And so all of us authors and educators have been hustling to get some great information out to all of you so that you can take advantage of the new exciting features. And in this case, we're going to talk about not the new exciting features, but rather something a little more nitty-gritty, right, David?
How to install. You got to get the software in before you can play with it.
That's right. And that may sound kind of, a little bit tedious, but it's not, because really you can't take advantage of all that Lightroom CC and Lightroom 6 have to offer unless you can get it running. And so David has been doing a lot of thinking about that subject, haven't you?
Unfortunately, it has become a big part of my week, trying to figure out how do we get access to these amazing new features.
Well, I think you have got it figured out, and I really appreciate that you're here with me today to explain some of the little dribs and drabs and some little procedural things that people might have to do as they try to get their software running. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is to try to clarify for everybody, in case there's any confusion, that there are two different versions of the software, and talk about the differences and the similarities between them. Can you give us a synopsis?
Well, so there's now a Lightroom 6, which is a standalone product, meaning you pay for the DVD or the download, you get a serial number, you type it in, you own the software, it's installed on your computer, but you're not part of Adobe's larger Creative Cloud program. There's also a Lightroom CC, Lightroom 2015. It's got a couple different names depending on where you see it. For those who are monthly subscribers, they get access to the new Lightroom, to Photoshop, perhaps to Lightroom, Photoshop, Premiere, and everything Adobe offers, depending on what level of Creative Cloud customer you are. So those who are buying Lightroom 6, the standalone, are getting one tiny piece of all the brilliant stuff Adobe has to offer. Those who are buying the Creative Cloud are getting more of the amazing stuff Adobe offers.
Okay, so let me see. Let's kind of summarize that. So you've got Lightroom 6, and for that you pay a fee, I believe it's $149, and you buy a download of the software, or you can also buy a boxed version of the software, I believe, from third-party retailers like Amazon.
I've seen it at Amazon, I've seen it at B&H, at least it's on their websites at this point. I don't know if it's shipping, but I know it's listed.
That's right. So and if you do that, then you own the software just like all in the past you've owned software, and that is called Lightroom 6. Then on the other hand, there is Lightroom CC, and that is a subscription model, and you download that also from Adobe, and then you get to download updates as they come out. Is that correct?
Well, I think both customers will get updates to Lightroom. The dot updates, the bug fixes, the new cameras that we've seen in the .1, .2, like right now, I think those running Lightroom 5 are at 5.7. As I understand it, the dot updates will be available to everyone. Adobe is not going to penalize the standalone audience in any way. If they find a bug and they figure out how to fix it, they want that info out there for everyone. But what those who get the standalone won't get is access to things like Lightroom Mobile, some of the other technology that Adobe is working on that goes beyond just the standalone desktop software. So for example, if you want to work with Lightroom Mobile on your phone or your iPad, you're not going to be able to do that if you buy the Lightroom 6 product. For the additional technology, you have to be part of the Creative Cloud subscription model.
That's right. And I think there may be another difference too, which is that if Adobe comes out with some updates to Lightroom that go beyond bug fixes and updates to compatible cameras and compatible lenses. For example, if they come up with a whole new feature, something that isn't there yet, that the release of that sort of feature may not be on the same schedule for Lightroom 6 users as it is for Lightroom CC users who have immediate access to those sorts of additions.
Again, these are hypotheticals. We don't know what magical, amazing things those geniuses have up their sleeves. But I think you're right in the release schedule. The beauty of the Creative Cloud app, like the App Store on your iPad, like your cell phone, is it allows Adobe to push those releases out to a wide audience. I think there are like 4 million Creative Cloud customers at this point, basically at the click of a button. They say, send the notification to everybody's computer, and then everybody's computer is aware that, yes, there's this new update to Lightroom. With the standalone product, there's a different route to updating that I think is a little slower. Now, again, I don't work for Adobe. I don't know what happens behind the scenes exactly. Those on the Creative Cloud will get notifications sooner than those who are not. But as far as I understand it, the dot releases will offer the same functionality for both types of customer.
Well, so now you can see that even among those who are allegedly in the know, we have a little disagreement. My understanding is that that has not been set in stone yet. That there may actually be some discrepancy, and we don't know. We'll have to see in the future if there are some technology updates beyond just bug fixes and camera and lens profiles. But we'll see. We'll see. Regardless, the big difference, to my mind, is the lack of interaction with Lightroom Mobile, with iPads, with iPhones, and with Android tablets and phones, if you're a Lightroom 6 owner, as opposed to a Lightroom CC subscriber who has all of that.
And I completely agree with you there. The other one I would add is, of course, the lack of access to Photoshop CC. And so for me, in my photography, in my classes, I love Lightroom. I mean, Lightroom is where all my photography begins and ends. But as you know, not everything is possible in Lightroom. So not having access to Photoshop, at least I would say to the most recent Photoshop, I don't need it for every image, but I need it for a lot of my images. That Lightroom is wonderful, but Lightroom is not everything. So for me, the big difference is, but I don't get Photoshop for my $10 a month. Or, if you just buy the Lightroom product, you don't get the latest in Photoshop.
That is a huge reason to go with CC in my mind as well. Although there is another way to go about doing your pixel editing, which is how I think of what, when I use Photoshop with Lightroom, it's for more the pixel-based sort of edits. And that is, amazingly, you can use Photoshop elements. And David, I just released a whole course on that on lynda.com, using Lightroom with Photoshop elements. And I don't think many people even think about doing that. But that's another option for people if they decide not to go with the Creative Cloud subscription, and yet they want a pixel editor to use in conjunction with Lightroom.
Well, and I guess I would add, and also in all fairness, Photoshop and Photoshop Elements are not the only pixel editors. There are other software out there. They just happen to be the family of products that I know, and that interact so beautifully with Lightroom. The Lightroom to Photoshop, the Lightroom to Photoshop Elements, and back is a very seamless, easy transition.
It is. So let me ask you, given everything that we've talked about, kind of set the stage for what the two products are, what are you recommending to your clients? Which one should they go with and why?
Well, I would say for 99% of the folks that I tutor, teach, help, I recommend the Creative Cloud subscription, because I really think it's a bargain. To have Photoshop and Lightroom for like $10 a month is an amazingly good deal to me. To have the access, if you want it on your mobile devices, And I need to be clear here that Lightroom Mobile is a work in progress. It's not a complete product. It's not everything I want on my iPad yet, but it's neat and it's getting better all the time. So to have all of that for $10 a month makes sense to me. And even if you're not using Photoshop or mobile right now, jump forward a year from now or 18 months, 2 years from now, things that are not a part of your daily routine now may well be of use to you down the road. So I'm thinking, to my mind, Creative Cloud makes far more sense for 99%. The 1% are those who do not connect to the internet, let's say at least once a month. And they are extremely rare. I call them basically those who live in caves. In the modern world, like, to be cut off from the internet for a month, for me, I would be lost. What would I do? But I do have a few students, a few friends who are, for whatever reason, off in remote places, on amazing world travels, living on a sailboat, crossing the ocean. There is a small audience where internet connectivity is not a part of their day. If that is true, then the Creative Cloud option really is perhaps not the right way to go. Now, again, I'm calling that the 1%. But I think it's worth knowing that all of these Creative Cloud apps, you do have to log on to the internet, let's say every 30-something days, so that it can relicense itself, so that it can update its serial number.
But important point being, you're not working on the cloud ever, regardless of which version of Lightroom you have. The software is running on your computer. Your photos are local. They are not up in some place called the Adobe Cloud. And so to the extent that there's any misconception about that, we want to be sure to lay that to rest.
Oh, that is absolutely true. That Adobe, I love them. I love their technology, but this Creative Cloud word is a disaster. Lightroom runs on your computer, no matter what version you get. Your photos are stored on your computer. That doesn't change. Nothing about this is cloud-based except how the serial number is typed in. Those who buy Lightroom standalone have to key in that whatever 15-digit, 30-digit serial number. Those who go the Creative Cloud route, they never see their serial number because the Creative Cloud app relicenses itself basically on a monthly basis. And that's where having no internet connectivity for an extended period of time could be a drawback. But again, we're talking a tiny fraction of people.
Right. And actually, there's something else. You mentioned serial number. My understanding is that whether you have Lightroom CC or Lightroom 6, Adobe is now going to keep track of whether you have a legitimate copy, not by serial number, but by your Adobe ID. And so it becomes important to have that as well, and to use one that you're going to remember, by the way, with a password you're going to remember no matter where you are.
And that's actually become part of the upgrade process. You have to log in with an Adobe ID. It's no longer optional, which is minor. But yes, you're absolutely right. You need to remember, like so many other things in our current world, what is my Adobe ID? One of those things you need to take notes of now.
So let's now talk about the nitty-gritty of upgrading. If let's say that you are already a user of Lightroom, that you have Lightroom 5 either through Creative Cloud or you have the standalone Lightroom 5, and you're ready to move to the next version, the new version of Lightroom. I know you're going to show us, you're going to do a demo and show us exactly how you would do that. But for those who can't see the podcast, they're listening to it, what would you say are the most important things to keep in mind about the upgrade process?
So I would suggest there are 3 steps to the upgrade process. First, like any software upgrade, you want to have a complete backup of your photos, and I would argue your whole computer. Like any major change, let's not do this. Let's not put everything at risk for no reason. Make a backup. If that means using an external hard drive, use an external hard drive. If you're not sure how to back up your computer, let's find that out before you install Lightroom anything, before you change operating systems. Always make a backup, just in case. Now, in this case, I've heard very few reports of Lightroom CC ate my computer, but why risk it? Let's just have a backup. So step 1, back everything up. It can't hurt. Step 2, we need the installer. Now here the path sort of forks. Those getting the installer from the Creative Cloud app will click this button. Those ordering from Amazon and waiting for a DVD to arrive, a slightly different route. But basically step 2, we run our installer. And then step 3, and I think this gets very muddled for a lot of folks, is that the software Lightroom and your catalog are separate parts. That if you want to think of it like Microsoft Word, there is the program Word. It is the typewriter, but then there's the document that you were writing. In this case, there's Lightroom, the program, and then there is your Lightroom catalog. And both of them need to be updated, but that's a separate step. There's installing the software and then updating your existing catalog. And lots of folks get really confused in that step 3.
So that's where sharing your screen and showing us exactly how all of that is done, I think is going to be really helpful for people. Would you be willing to do that now?
Absolutely. I would love to. Let's see. I will skip the step 1 part, except to say, please make a backup on a separate hard drive before you do anything major, just in case. All right, so then let me start the screen sharing here. And
while you're doing that, I have a question I wanted to ask you. When you say make a backup, what do you recommend people back up? Photos, catalog, entire computer, what?
How about all of the above and more? Is there a choice C? I think when we're talking backup, obviously we want to be sure you have your photos and your Lightroom catalog. Since we're talking about serious photographers here, that's our audience, I assume. Our photos are probably the most precious thing in our computer. Those are priority A. But your Lightroom catalog is also important. Call it B, because we'd hate to start over, having to build a whole new catalog. For folks like you and I who've been doing this for 7 years in Lightroom, building a new catalog, it's not impossible, but what a nightmare. But then there's the whole computer itself. My opinion of backups is back it all up. If you don't use the extra stuff, no harm done. Hard drives are cheap. Just have a backup. Have more than one backup. You never know. So for those who are running the Creative Cloud, and I guess I should say step 1 here, I've made my backup. Let's pretend that's done. And I actually did this morning before the demo. I backed up the whole darn computer. It was just, especially for folks on a Mac using Time Machine, couldn't be easier. Plug in your disk, tell Time Machine to run, give it an hour or however long it takes. Windows folks, you have a very similar utility, although very few people find it, the Windows backup utility. But anyway, so we've made our backup. Now for those running the Creative Cloud, the head scratcher is, how do I install new software? Those getting it Lightroom 6 in a box on a DVD from Amazon, well, you know how you got your software. The UPS guy brought it to you. So the Lightroom 6 crowd would pop in their DVD or their download. The Creative Cloud folks, though, what we need to do is go to the app and go to the Creative Cloud app, and we'll probably get a notification like this that says new update. And what we'll find is this one that says Lightroom CC 2015.
Just one, I need to interject something. I don't have a Windows machine here, but my understanding is that the Creative Cloud app on Windows is down in the taskbar, and it's one of the hidden icons. And so you have to click on hidden icons down there to get to that little squiggle logo for the Creative Cloud app. Is that correct?
Well, it's not always a hidden icon, but Windows folks, you'll find the same thing down here. Although both Mac and Windows, you'll also find in your applications on the Mac or programs on Windows, you'll also find it under a folder in your programs applications called Adobe Creative Cloud. So for either platform, if you can't find the little widget, you will find it here in your programs or applications folder.
Great, thank you.
Good point. That again, these things get so complicated because the Mac screen looks this way and the Windows screen looks that way. But either way, those running the Creative Cloud, we should get to here. Now, if you do get to here and you don't see Lightroom CC 2015 listed, And there have been a lot of reports of folks getting here but not seeing the installer. The advice is click on the little gear, go to preferences, and sign out. Sign out of the app. My advice would be then restart your computer, make sure you're on the internet, and then sign back in. And it seems like that sign out, sign in is what triggers this popping up for a lot of people. There have been a lot of reports of folks just not seeing the installer.
And just to be clear, when you say sign out and in of the app, you're talking about the Creative Cloud app, not Lightroom.
Right, talking about the Creative Cloud app. At this point, not really doing anything within the Lightroom program itself. So to keep things rolling, I'm going to hit this install here in the Creative Cloud app, and that will start downloading the new Lightroom CC. They call it CC parentheses 2015 software. Now, while that's running in the background, I should add, I'm going to do one more sort of, call it paranoia step. I'm going to go to my current Lightroom catalog. So for me, that's Lightroom 5. And in my current Lightroom catalog, I'm going to make sure that I have saved all of my metadata, that I've saved all of my work. The easiest way to do this is to go Edit, Select All, Metadata, Save Metadata to Files. On the Mac, Command S, on the PC, Control S. Call it just sheer paranoia. But if something goes horribly wrong, by saving all of my metadata down, metadata means my keywords, my copyright, my develop settings, if you've used the map module, your coordinates, by saving all of those down, if I had to make a new Lightroom catalog from scratch, at least I don't have to type in all my keywords over again. It wouldn't protect everything, but it would protect most of the stuff I've done. The other reason I think you want to go to your old catalog before you finish this download or whatever is to find out where does your catalog live. Because like I said, the software installation and the catalog upgrade process are two separate steps. And so many people get confused because they don't know the name of their current Lightroom catalog or where to find it in the computer. But it's really easy to find out. On the Mac, go Lightroom Catalog Settings. On the PC, go Edit Catalog Settings. Same menu, just changes where it lives. And in this Catalog Settings menu, in the General tab, there is this information line that says what folder your catalog lives in and what is the name of your Lightroom catalog. Now, my favorite in here is to hit this Show button. It says Show on the Mac. I believe on the PC it says Show in Explorer. And when you do, a separate window is going to open up. Then my advice is kind of just move that window out of the way. Don't worry about, don't delete it, but just pay attention to, or don't close it, but pay real careful attention to your current catalog's file name. We can close this window. We can quit out of Lightroom. At this point, once we've saved our metadata, we've done fine. I'm going to skip for now. Once the app has downloaded and installed, we're going to need to upgrade our catalog. And that's where having this separate window that literally says, this is your Lightroom catalog, the LRCat file, is so helpful.
That's all really good advice. I see that your download is going a little bit slowly, but that's good because it gives us opportunity to talk a little. I thought it was very good advice to tell people to save the metadata into their files. But I know that there are people out there who aren't clear on where that information lives if they don't save it into their files. Maybe you could talk a little about that.
So the way that Lightroom works, when we make a change in Lightroom, let's say we add a keyword, that is written into our catalog file, the LRCat file. And that's part of what makes Lightroom so speedy is it doesn't have to go and write that into each and every photo. Let's say you add 1,000 keywords, select all family, select all landscape. Lightroom can work very fast because it wrote it in its own database. That's what the LRCat file is. But it didn't have to open and close 1,000 photos saying family, landscape, all at once. The problem is if it doesn't write them back into those files at some point, and your Lightroom catalog gets lost, corrupted, destroyed, deleted, you've lost all that hard work. So by only saving at the catalog level, you gain performance up until something goes wrong. And then we could be really counterproductive if you have to go back and remove every dust spot that you've ever removed. So I think saving the metadata down before we do something like a major catalog update, before we install new software, that's a good use of our time.
That's great. A great answer. In a nutshell, by default, everything you do in Lightroom gets saved into the catalog only and not into the files, because there is a checkbox that you could turn on in preferences that would automatically save everything you do into your files. But as David has said, that could be a performance hit. So if you do want to save to your files, you have to do it manually or go back into preferences and check that box.
Okay, so let me restart the screen share because at this point my new software has downloaded. All right, so software has been installed, and I can see that right here. It now says, hopefully you can see that too. It says Lightroom CC 2015. Now I want to point out at this point that Lightroom CC 2015 or Lightroom 6 is a separate application from Lightroom 5. That nothing was removed. That's why I still have Lightroom 5 listed here and Lightroom 6, that they are separate programs. And so this is where there's some confusion, that the way that Adobe does their software upgrades, and I need to be clear, upgrade, not update, they leave them on your hard drive as separates. So if I was to go and look on my hard drive right now, I would find that I still have in the programs or applications folder, I still have Lightroom 5.app on the Mac, .exe on the PC, but I have this new folder now called plain old Adobe Lightroom for those running the Creative Cloud. They took the CC part out of it. I don't know why, but it's just not there. Well, if I try and launch the new Lightroom 6, Lightroom CC, the brandless Adobe Lightroom, when I launch it, it's going to say, what catalog should you update? Now, it may have found the default, or it may ask you what catalog. And so this is that, say, step 3 part, where we need to be really clear that just installing the new software did not update our catalog, our database. So I'm going to tell it, in my case, to use my catalog. And in mine is named David's Lightroom Catalog, and it lives in my Lightroom Catalog folder. And that's why that separate window that I opened out of Lightroom 5, it's so helpful for me to double check, yes, this is my catalog. Yes, this is the window it lives in. So I'll tell it to open this catalog. And when I do, I'll get a box that says, I need to upgrade the catalog because Lightroom 6 uses a different catalog format than Lightroom 5 ever did.
Hang on, I have something I wanted to ask you. Please. Sometimes, am I right that you don't have to go and find this Lightroom 5 catalog? It just finds, as you mentioned, but you kind of went fast, it just goes right to this screen that says, we need to upgrade your catalog for use with Lightroom 6.
Often it will sense that this is the catalog you were using last, or this is the catalog that's been set as the default, and it will just say, should I upgrade your catalog? And in fact, especially those running the standalone installer, there's even a button that says like upgrade now, but it doesn't always pick it up. And this is where, especially those running multiple Lightroom catalogs, which I do not recommend. But if you have multiple Lightroom catalogs, you have to upgrade each catalog for the Lightroom CC, Lightroom 6 format. So hopefully it knew which catalog you wanted. In that case, great, you saved a step. If it didn't, then we got to tell it, this is the one I want.
Thank you.
No problem. So I'll hit upgrade. Now, if you have a small Lightroom catalog, and I have to say here, for this demo, I'm using a small Lightroom catalog. I've got 100-something photos in here. If you have a small Lightroom catalog, it upgrades very, very quickly. If you have a big Lightroom catalog, hundreds of thousands of photos, that progress bar might chug along. But eventually we're going to get to this screen. Now here, it's going to ask, for those running the CC version, should I sync with Lightroom Mobile?
Wait, I got to stop you again, because remember, David, I'm sorry, but some people can't see. They're just listening.
Sure.
So I want to be clear that what happened after David hit the upgrade button is his catalog that he'd chosen was upgraded for use with Lightroom 6/CC, and Lightroom 6/CC opened on his screen with that catalog, and that's where he is now.
And at this point, you'll be given the choice of synchronizing with Lightroom Mobile if you're on the CC version. And my advice here is, if you have been syncing, if you've been using Lightroom Mobile, keep on syncing. If you haven't been syncing, just turn it off. We can always turn this feature back on later. It's not a turn it off now and you're banned forever. Anyway, we'll hit continue, and then we'll get, it might ask if it can open the keychain. I'm going to tell it fine. All it's doing there is basically getting permission to use my Adobe ID in the background. Anyway, at this point, we're into Lightroom CC, into Lightroom 6. And I'm going to suggest there's one more step that I like to take, but that is actually the whole process. That's all the minimum required steps. You'll know that you're into Lightroom CC or Lightroom 6 on the Mac if you go Lightroom About. It'll say Lightroom CC. PC folks, I believe you have the same thing over here under Help. It says About Lightroom. The button moves around, but it's the same. So here I am in the new Lightroom. Now, the last step I would suggest is what I see the most when I teach Lightroom is confusion about the Lightroom catalog. And one of the reasons I think people get so confused is that they don't take ownership over the catalog itself. They don't make it clear to themselves that this is my catalog, my database about my photography. So what I recommend in my classes, lectures, video tutorials, is to go to that catalog settings menu again, so that we can see where our catalog currently lives and what it's been called. And what I think a lot of people are going to see is that their catalog name now says -2 or some dash number. The reason it dash -2 is that when they upgraded my catalog from Lightroom 5 to Lightroom CC, Adobe didn't want to overwrite the old catalog. So it created a new one. And in fact, if I hit that Show in Finder, Show in Explorer button, and I close out of Lightroom, so let me just close some windows here, back at the plain old operating system level. So the biggest confusion I see across the board, whether you're running Lightroom CC or Lightroom 6, is that when the catalog upgrade process is done, you'll be left with two catalogs, your old Lightroom 5 catalog and your new Lightroom CC, Lightroom 6 catalog. And to try and make this clear, I've named my old catalog Lightroom 5 catalog. And when I upgraded it, what Adobe did, they didn't name it Lightroom 6 or Lightroom CC. They just appended -2 onto the end of the name. Well, the reason this confuses so many folks is that if you go and click on the old one again, you're going to get this message that says, do you want to upgrade all over again? And I see so many people who hit yes, and then they get -3, -4, -5, on and on and on, that it creates this endless cycle of catalog upgrades that we really didn't need. And it just gets confusing.
That is a very important point. And honestly, you can see all of these sticking points that people are likely to hit. And this is a big one. So what would you do at this point, David? Would you rename your David's Lightroom 5 catalog 2 and call it David's Lightroom 6 catalog?
Exactly. What I would recommend, I don't think you want to delete, let me just get one thing out of the way that we don't need here. I don't see any reason to delete your old Lightroom 5 or whatever version catalog. But I do think it's worth making clear to yourself that this is my current Lightroom catalog, and the other one is my old one. So what I like to do is go to your current Lightroom catalog, and hopefully that's the one that says -2. And then we want to carefully rename it. So what I recommend is take the -2 catalog, the one that we know works in Lightroom 6, carefully click on it to rename it. And I like to make this one say like David's Lightroom 6 or Lightroom CC catalog. I'm going to take off the -2, but I'm going to be really careful not to delete the .lrcat, the extension on the file. So I'm going to make this one say David's Lightroom CC or Lightroom 6 catalog. And whatever you do to this one, you have to also do to the previews. Now, on the Mac, the previews looks like a file. On the PC, it looks like a folder. But again, the name has to be consistent. So if I named this one David's Lightroom catalog, Lightroom CC catalog, I want to carefully rename this one to say David's Lightroom CC catalog, but keep the previews.lr data part. So I'm going to remove the -2, but I'm going to be real careful not to remove the word previews and what comes after it. And when these two are named the same, this old Lightroom 5 catalog, you could delete it. I don't recommend you do. You could move it to another folder. For now, I'll just move it into some other folder to get it out of the way. All that you need is your Lightroom catalog.lrcat, your Lightroom catalog previews. Again, on the Mac, it says .lr data. On Windows, it looks like a folder. And if you double click on that catalog, on the lrcat, that will relaunch Lightroom in this catalog. And what I hope you'll see, let me know if the screen share stops, is at the top on the Mac, it will say now David's Lightroom CC catalog. Windows folks, it says the same thing, but it says it a little higher up on the screen.
Terrific, terrific. That was so clear. Now, what about for the next time, next week I come and I want to easily open the same catalog. How can I set that up?
So very last step, I would argue here. If you go to the preferences, now on the Mac, preferences lives under edit preferences. On the PC, it lives under Lightroom preferences. In the very first preferences panel, the general panel, about an inch down the screen, it says default catalog. When starting up, use this catalog. And there it gives you choices. So if you're like me and you only have one Lightroom catalog and you always want to load your one catalog, click here where it says probably load most recent and pick the one on the list that you just named. So I'm going to pick the one that says, in my case, David's Lightroom CC catalog. And
I think you picked the wrong one. You picked
I didn't rename the folder that it lives in.
I see.
I should have renamed the folder too, but you can see at the end of its file name, it says David's Lightroom CC catalog. Anyway, I'll prove that it worked. PC folks, I think you have an OK button in here. Mac folks, we just close this little window. We'll know it worked if we just quit out of Lightroom. I'm going to skip the backup. Sorry, it keeps trying to back up. If I quit out of Lightroom and then I go to just my applications folder, and if I launch Lightroom plain old, or if I launch it off the dock or the quick launch, depending, if it opens David's Lightroom catalog with no questions, we're good. And indeed it did.
Yay. Well, we don't get to see that because we're looking at your pretty face, but that's okay because I think we understand. So that was absolutely terrific, David. There are a lot of steps there and they are not always clear, particularly to someone who doesn't spend their life thinking about Lightroom like you and I do. And so this is just such a great resource for people. They'll always be able to come back to this episode of The Fix and see all the steps that you so carefully and thoughtfully laid out. And I must thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, I guess in the shameless self-promotion, at my own website, I have a series of video tutorials on this if this went too fast for you.
Yes, you do. And would you mind then reminding people where your website is and where they can find what you do online?
Well, my website is davidmarx.com, just like my name. And at my website, you'll find video tutorials, you'll find articles, you'll find links to the photography mentorship that I run through the Arcanum and to my field workshops. Because as exciting as talking about how to install Lightroom is, it's not really why I became a professional photographer.
That's right. And you are a really terrific landscape photographer in particular. So do go to davidmarx.com, if for no other reason than to see some of his fantastic landscape photos from Iceland, from the American West, and other places as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you, David, for being with me today. We've run longer than we usually do, but that's because I think this is really important, and I wanted to be sure that everybody saw all the steps.
I appreciate it, and thank you so much for having me on. And please, I know it takes a bunch of steps, but there's some amazing stuff in Lightroom CC, Lightroom 6, worth your effort.
Thanks, David Marx, for sharing all that practical information. I hope you found it useful. If you have any further questions about installing or upgrading to Lightroom CC, please add a comment to the post about this broadcast at thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX, and we'll try to answer it for you. If you like this episode of The Fix, I hope that you'll share it with your friends so that everybody can benefit from the great information about how to install and upgrade to the very newest version of Lightroom. This is Jan Kabili. See you next week for another episode of TWiP The Fix.